Hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. I'm Jason Paul. Now, get ready for an extraordinary episode of Soul Sync as we welcome one of Australia's most distinguished spiritual mediums and influential teachers, Christine Morgan. She's based in Sydney, and Christine brings a wealth of experience and a profound lineage of psychics and mediums from the UK, making her a true powerhouse in the realm of spiritual arts. With 32 years of dedicated service in the field of spiritual mediumship and intuitive arts, Christine's journey has taken her across continents, sharing her expertise in the USA, Canada, Europe, and of course her spiritual home, England. Notably, Christine opened the Spiritualist Sanctuary in Perth, Western Australia, an immensely successful centre for the development of spiritualism and mediumship. Building on this success, Christine relocated to Sydney, where she has further expanded her community, now boasting a global presence with students from all across the world joining her classes. As a certificate holder of the Spiritualist National Union and a respected tutor and course organiser at the prestigious Arthur Findlay College, Christine's commitment to the standards of true spiritual mediumship is unwavering. Now, in this episode, Christine takes us on a voyage through the natural wonders of the spirit world, offering insights honed through classical training and a lineage deeply rooted in intuitive abilities. Her contemporary approach to teaching and demonstrating mediumship reflects the essence of the great pioneers of spiritualism, bringing relevance and authenticity to this old age practice. Now, Christine's influence extends beyond the spiritual community. She's sought after by diverse organisations, the business community and individuals alike. Her expertise shines not only in educational workshops, seminars and guest speaking engagements, but also in private consultations, grief support and personal coaching. Join us as Christine Morgan unfolds the mysteries of the spirit world, sharing her journey from Perth to Sydney, weaving a global community of students passionate about natural mediumship, from suicide support groups to families coping with loss. Christine's work exemplifies the profound care and understanding that defines her mission in the world of spirituality. So don't miss this enlightening episode. This conversation was great. I really loved it, and I really loved talking to Christine. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it as much as I did. So Christine, thank you for joining me on the Soul Sync. Christine, thank you for joining me on the Soul Sync.
Thank you for having me, Jason. Lovely to be here. Lovely to meet you.
So people have heard a really interesting intro all about you just a moment ago. But tell us about you and your journey, first of all, to getting to where you are now. I appreciate there's a lot to unpack, but tell us a bit about you and how you've come to become a medium.
Oh, gosh. Okay. It's a long time ago. I feel like an old duck. Okay. Well, the truth is I'm a reluctant medium. I was the reluctant medium. I never really wanted to be a medium. My dad was a medium in the UK, a well-known medium, and ran a spiritualist church, very strong spiritualist. My grandfather on my mum's side dabbled with mediumship, and my grandmother was a very natural medium. So I come from a very strong psychic side in my mother's side, which I can talk a little bit about. And so I guess it's in my blood, it's in both sides, but it's not something I really want to do. Mm-hmm. I was in the hair and beauty industry. I'm an ex-hairdresser, and I had a few experiences in my teens, I would say. I didn't have imaginary friends as a child or anything like that. But I had a few experiences, and I just was quite perceptive. I would say that now looking back, and that's what my mum tells me. And my mum's very natural. My mum sees the spirit and feels the spirit very naturally. And so I didn't really think too much about it till I got into my mid to late 20s, and I started to have very strong experiences through the dream state.
What experiences were you having?
Well, when I was in my teenage years, I would have very prophetic dreams, very strong psychic dreams, that I would dream something and the next day it would be in the newspapers or it would be in the news or little things like that. And I sort of would always have a feeling when there was a warning around something going wrong. And I would dream, and I started to understand that I was getting things in symbolic form. And so I spoke to my dad, who was the medium in the UK, and he said, journal it and watch it and see what happens. Let it unfold if it goes anywhere. So I had those experiences, and then probably in my mid-20s, I started to dream a lot. And my dreams were quite prophetic, psychic, but also I had visitations from the spirit world where I knew that I was talking, seeing people from my family who'd passed. So quite honestly, I really didn't want to do anything with it. I was really not bothered. But through a process of different experiences, it got to the stage where I needed to. So one of the funniest things that happened is, I was already doing little things like I was hairdressing, but I used to read people's teacups in the hair salon because my grandmother read the teacups. My grandmother also did pyromancy, read the flames in the fire.
Oh, you'll have to tell us about both of those things in a minute.
Yeah, and my mum also read the teacups. And, I come from a family of a lot of girls, and my mum had a lot of sisters, and they'd say, oh, I had this dream. What do you think that meant? Or go and pick up her piece of jewelry and give us a reading and do this sort of stuff. They were all always into that sort of stuff. So there was an openness. But it wasn't so much a spiritualist family. My parents divorced. I moved to Australia with my mum and stepdad. And my biological dad, who was the medium, stayed in the UK. So I didn't really get brought up with a spiritualist family, but I did get brought up with a knowing that the spirit world was real. My mum and my grandmother always said the spirit was real, and they would talk about the spirit very openly. So consequently, in my late 20s, when these dreams started happening and these experiences, it just encouraged me to find out a little bit more, but I wasn't really serious. I played and dabbled. I went to different groups trying to find a teacher. I went to development groups and that sort of stuff, and I really wasn't interested until I started to spend a lot more time in the UK with my dad. And my dad used to be the president of the Runcorn Spiritualist Church in Cheshire.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, well, the wonderful thing I think he's now passed for the last 5 years, is his students who started off with him are now the president and running it, which is fantastic. And the great mediums, those girls. So they had their beginnings with my dad. So he'd be quite proud in the spirit world. So I went to the UK and I was having experiences. My dad was doing services and he'd say, oh, come and do a service. Come to a service, Christine, or do you want to come to class tonight? So I'd go to the church with my dad and I'd sit at the back and sit in the development circle because I wanted a message. I just wanted to play and have a message. But lo and behold, what happened, I started to have experiences, and my dad taught me how to sit quietly. And things went from there. And then I came back to Australia, and I really didn't have anywhere to go. There was some spiritualist churches, but they were very old-fashioned. And I'll be quite honest, I was just nearly 30, and I was from a very hip, trendy hair fashion background where you didn't want to talk to old ladies with cups of tea about dead husbands.
Yeah.
Because that was my misconception. That was my misconception when I look back now, but that's what I thought it was. But my father tracked down a lady in Western Australia, a very well-known spiritualist, and he said to me, go and talk to her. So I talked to her, and I'd been sitting at home quietly on my own to develop under my dad's guidance. I'd been reading lots and lots of books, and I was still just playing. I wasn't serious. And after talking to this lady, she said, oh, you need to go to a development circle. But I only lasted 6 months because it was too strict. It was very old-fashioned and it was very strict. And I was already having very natural experiences that I didn't want to lose. So consequently, I was still working, hairdressing. And I used to run a chain of 6 major hair and beauty salons. So I was busy. And then when I used to have one day on the floor cutting hair on a Friday and had all my old clients. And they all used to have their teacups read. I used to read their cups all the time. So there was all this.
When you're reading a teacup, what is that?
Well, you're reading symbolically the form of the leaves. You can read from a particular tea leaf is really needed. And then you can read the symbols from the shape of the leaves, depending how you swirl the excess fluid and the tea leaves around the cup at the end of drinking the cup of tea. But then also there's quite an art to it. And And with tasseography, which is what it's called, the true tea leaf art is the fact that there's different time frames to be set of where you look in the cup, where the shape is, where the symbol is, etc., etc. So my mum and my grandmother taught me that. And so, you know, I did it just to play with the girls in the salon. I used to do it and things like that. But it was stimulating my psychic all the time. So I had this psychic stream in me anyway, and it was getting stimulated. And then gradually I had some very strong experiences with the spirit world where I knew I had to do something. And my dad said, Christine, are you going to get serious? You know, do you want to go into this? Do you want to take this seriously? Because my dad was a serious spiritualist. There was no messing about. He was old school, you know, 3-piece suit on a platform on a Sunday, very old fashioned. But I loved it because I loved the way he spoke about the spirit world, and he always encouraged to understand the philosophy. And he also talked about the 7 principles of spiritualism and all that sort of thing. So he didn't just give me, you know, yes, you're a psychic. He actually said, if you want to work for the spirit world, you have to do this, and you have to go through this course of development, which doesn't happen overnight, Christine, and you have to learn and understand.
Yeah, what were the experiences that then led to you sort of taking this a lot more seriously?
Okay. One of the major ones was I was married then, and I was going to a girlfriend's wedding, and I was putting a pie in the oven for my then husband before the wedding because we knew the reception meal would be late. And said, oh, I'll warm up the pie for you to eat before we go. And as I did so, clairvoyantly, my whole oven turned to blue flames. And I heard a lady speaking to me and telling me there would be no wedding photographs at the farm, but there would be a substitute. All would be well. And I just went, what? And I seen the lady clairvoyantly, and I heard her name, which obviously I won't discuss. And I told my husband, and he said, oh, here we go again, you know, here we go again. And lo and behold, I go to my girlfriend's wedding, who I was hairdressing with at that stage, and she gets married, and at reception, she's nowhere to be seen. Comes in an hour later, upset. The farmstead she was due to have her wedding photographs had burnt down that day, the same time I'd put the pie in the oven for my husband. And they'd had to find a last-minute venue. So when they did, I went, oh, I didn't say anything. And it wasn't until a few weeks later when I seen her that I got the courage and said, oh, do you know a lady by the name of such and such? She said, yeah, that's my grandmother, but she's been dead for 10 years.
How
so it was
crazy.
My grandmother that paid me a visit, and I clairvoyantly had, you know, seen that. Now, if it wasn't for having the lady's name and seeing her, I would say I'd just psychically picked that up, but I knew I'd had a spirit intervention. So that was one of them. And then the second one that really made me take notice was I went to sleep, and in a dream state, I felt myself rise from my body, even though I was, you know, still in my body, and be led out of my bedroom door by a man. All I can say, he was a native. That's all I can say. He was an Indian native, and he had paint on him. You look back now and say, what was that? But that's what happened. But as I did so, I passed I saw myself in my dream state passing my dining table. And at the top of my dining table was my grandfather, who also dabbled in the mediumship and was into mediumship. And he sat there and he just looked at me, nodded. And this Indian lovely knave took me outside of my home, and in bright blue paint, I remember it like yesterday, he wrote evidence on my pergola wall. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up and I was in my bed, and I knew I'd had a spiritual experience. Now, the interesting thing is there, Jason, my grandfather died the year before I was born. I never met him. And there was only 2 photographs, and I could describe him to a T to my mother. And so I believe my granddad from the spirit world was telling me that we're to look, and the lovely Indian man, that we're to look for evidence when we're working with the spirit world, because I was in a stage of trying different groups. I was doing meditation classes with Buddhists, which I loved. And I was trying all sorts of stuff to try and find truth and guidance. And they were the two most strongest experiences that really turned my mind into thinking, I really want to do something. I just felt there was something there I could do. So spoke to my dad in England, and he gave me guidelines. He sent me lots of books. You know, he had me reading every book that he had that I could find. Lots of reading, lots of sitting, taught me how to sit in the power, taught me how to be quiet and what to expect. He was very strict. And another experience I had when I first started sitting was his mother, who died when I was a little girl in England, actually built up in front of me clairvoyantly. And I knew that I'd seen this lady. So all these experiences started to speed up. So
why do you think that was? Why do you think that?
Oh, I think that was the spirit world letting me know that should I wish to develop and learn more about their world, they were there. And my loved ones and family members were there. So because it was in both sides of my family, my mum's and my dad's, you know, I've often thought, was I just always meant to do this? I don't know. But so my dad found this other lady in Western Australia. I had a chat to her and she said, you should just do this, Christine. So I did it. I did join a circle with her for 6 months, but I ended up leaving. But I did go back to work on her platform in her church for years later. And so I developed at home, really, Jason, by myself. I used to sit every morning for an hour.
Tell us about what you were doing to develop. What would be you go and sit, and you mentioned that your dad obviously taught you his technique. What is it? How would you describe to people your methods of what you were doing there?
I do think that the importance of attunement to the spirit world and having a conducive environment and vibration is very, very important. And I feel that to sit with the spirit world, you know, what we need to do is just be quiet and not to have expectation or demand or place an assumption on any outcome. So my way, what I did at that time, and of course that's changed as you get more education and more knowledgeable and you grow, you mature with your craft and you grow and understand where you were making mistakes and things like that. So for me, I just used to sit quietly to music. But eventually my dad said to me, stop the music because your mind is picking up and knowing what the note is next. Your mind and your brain knows what's coming. Endeavor to sit in the silence. And my dad was very, very strict, and I am, about prayer. You know, in correct intention, say a prayer to the spirit world and have a purposeful intention of why you want to sit to build this power, why you want to do this. Because my dad used to say to me, you're not doing this for fun. And don't think you're going to make an extra couple of dollars. That's not what you're doing. You know, he was very strict. And so I started to do that. So for me, I just used to sit quietly. And I had a lot of amazing experiences where I knew my consciousness was expanding and I was touching a deeper part of myself and this great external part around us that we endeavor to work with the spirit world. We call it external, but it's not because we're all in it. And, you know, we walk between worlds, as we say, they're in us, we're in them. So that sitting in that power and that quiet time, that attunement, that blending is absolutely vital for development. Giving time to them without the demand or the desire or the ego, engineering, constructing, and designing what people think their mediumship should be. And I think that's where we fall down today. People want to design their mediumship to what they want it to be without the natural unfoldment.
I think part of the problem, and this is what I've found anyway, and I think probably owning my own business drives this as well, is I'm constantly seeking information outside of myself. You know, I'm always going from one book to another book to a YouTube video to this or that. And, you know, so I think maybe if you reverse back 25 years, you'd really stick to one thing because you might only have one book on mediumship. So almost I think that the world we're living in now is so not conducive in a way to developing mediumship. What experiences when you've been sitting have you ever kind of felt that, is it always spirit coming to you, or have you felt that you've maybe gone to some other place while you've
Okay.
been sitting?
Well, we all know the spirit lower their vibrations, and by us moving into that power, into that quiet state, into that state of awareness, which is beyond this mental busyness of mind, it's just a state of being. So for me, the power, as we, the coined word of which Glyn Edwards coined it, the power in the college years ago. This state of being is just being quiet with the other world and allow them to touch your mind. By you setting your intention and keeping your focus in that intention and allowing that to happen, you're invoking and inviting the other world as a little signal, a vibration that you want to learn more about them, want to work with them. And of course, we can't construct or design what we want to be. So it's about them touching us and then helping us unfold what abilities we have within us inherently. So experiences with the power, I've had wonderful experiences where something that has happened, which now has taken me like 30 years to find the truth, is I became very, very drawn to Egyptology, very, very drawn to the ancient Egyptian aspects. And I would have very vivid dreams. And I was very drawn to old Arabic things and old Egyptian stuff. And as this took place, over the years, I had several dreams, and one of them was of a wonderful man, and he was very, very tall. And he took me in a dream state to a village he lived in, and it was old Africa. And he gave me a name, and he showed me over quite a few years different aspects of things. One of them was he took me inside of an old boab tree.
Wow.
Which he said was his home at one stage. And I saw him really maybe about 4 or 5 times over about 15 years. It wasn't regular, but when I had the experiences, they were very, very powerful. And I later found out that the name he had given me was Old Ancient Egyptian African, because Old Africa and Old Egypt were part of the one. And the other things he had given me were names of trees and plants from Old Africa, which was classed as Old Egypt years ago. So he is, I call him African Egyptian. And I used to say, well, is this just, are you a guide? Who are you? Are you a friend who's helping me? Or are you just part of a consciousness that I'm touching, or I'm making this up? And over the years, he's proved to me so many times who he is by all these little experiences when I've been in the power or in a dream state. And then my father, out of the blue one day, told me his name, which was his name. So it was confirmation. And he has been drawn for me and seen with me several times. And the reason I bring him up, even though we all work with lots of different people in the spirit world, he is a key teacher for me in my work. And over the years, he's given me the experiences of when I sat in the power. There was one day, I remember I could feel this expansion of self. And all of a sudden, clairvoyantly, I saw a huge sphinx build in my lounge room, massive sphinx. And I thought, oh my goodness. And before I knew it, I was the sphinx. I became the sphinx. So I knew in that state of my mind, the expansion of consciousness, I was having the experience of being the sphinx. And it was relayed back to me evidentially through him years and years later. So I've had evidence given to me over the years of the things he's dropped into my consciousness in those experiences.
Do you know who he is now in terms of to you? Is he a teacher, or is he just someone?
Oh, yeah, he's a teacher. He's someone, I would call him a lovely friend in the spirit world who comes very close to me. I saw him I did see him once last year. I woke up through the night and he was by my bed, and I saw him as strong as anything. And I haven't seen him for a while. But I said, oh, I've seen you. You're here. You're still around. Because I've been saying, where are you? Haven't felt you. Where are you? What's happened? Have I let you down? Have I done something wrong? The typical mind comes in. And then a few months later, he showed himself to me. So he's around. But his experiences that were given to me, he gave to me as a way of trying to understand myself and my own expansion of consciousness to be able to touch that world.
Oh.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but I'm guessing he's done it in that way, because if it was simply him to tell you something,
Well, you wouldn't believe it.
yeah, you wouldn't have had, it wouldn't have had the same impact. I guess it's grabbing your attention because it's that, and I was talking about this the other day. If I'm in a medium, if I'm a sitter and someone gives me a bit of evidence, it's really impressive. They tell me something based on evidence, and I do go, oh, yeah, okay, that's really good. But I forget about it. But it's those moments when you get a message and you realize it afterwards, or something happens, the impact is, tenfold, isn't it? It really
It is.
stops you
It
in
is.
your tracks.
It is. So that sort of thing. So for development, the power, learning to be quiet and really learning about yourself. Self-awareness is paramount. Really understanding your own energy and where you're at mentally, emotionally, all those things before you even start to sit with the spirit world. And even when you sit, recognizing where you're at in a daily way to, help your, whatever short time you sit with the spirit world, help it to be more fulfilling and fruitful for you. So the journey of self, and the spirit world are always saying, cleanse yourself of self. And they're talking about clearing our heads, getting rid of the busy mind, and just being as natural as possible. So for me, I don't think you need techniques or formulas to sit in the power. I think you need a good heart and intention and to be very natural, but to be consistent in the correct environment to be able to do it.
For someone starting out with sitting in the power, what intention should they be sort of striving to achieve? Or is that a totally personal?
I think it is personal, but I also think what you should be first doing is recognizing your own energy and your own self, because our mind and our psychic mind is so powerful. We can create and do so much, and the poor spirit world get blamed for everything. So I think they do. And so I think when you're starting out, purposeful intention is important, that you recognize where you are emotionally and mentally, and also look at the reasons underneath why you really want to do this. Why do you want to forge a relationship with the spirit world? So if you think about it, you nurture your friendships here. You need to nurture your friendships with those in the spirit as well. It's a two-way street, a relationship that needs nurturing and care and nourishment and attention. And so does the craft of mediumship. And so that is very important at the beginning.
That's really helpful. So you have gone on to open up the Spiritualist Sanctuary in Perth. Tell us a bit about that and what led you to actually, and well, first of all, tell us a bit about what it is. I know what it is. Okay. And how that's come about.
Okay. Well, I was once I became fairly developed and I was traveling back and forwards to the college, I did a lot of years, many, many, many years ago before I was teaching, I did a lot of weeks of students. I worked across the UK with my father. Every time I went back, we were out demonstrating together.
I must admit, I do find that funny, the fact that you talk so casually about just coming back to the college like it's almost a drive around the M25. But for you, it's...
Jet lag. No, yeah. I mean, I still come back now, obviously, but I loved it. So when my dad was alive, I used to go and have a couple of months with my dad or 6 weeks with my dad and do as much as the college as I could as a student. But I was learning outside of the college. I was already working, doing readings and everything before I went to the college as a student. But the college really helped me, and I met some wonderful people there. So it helped me put sort of building blocks and things and straighten things out for me and showed me where I could be better or showed me where I was going wrong. So I was very blessed to be around some great old teachers who we haven't got around anymore, people like Glenn Edwards, and I used to love going to Glenn's classes. And I did quite a bit with Simon James and Brian Robertson, particularly Simon.
They're
Simon,
both on they're on an episode together actually of the podcast.
oh, they really?
Yeah, both
Well,
they're talking about their book, which
well,
I must admit is a great book.
well, Simon and Brian are very, very close with me. I'm very good friends with them. We're not just colleagues, we're close friends. Before I go on to that, I actually was working for the union in Western Australia, and I was demonstrating and everything. And then I wanted to do something a little bit different on it. I couldn't get the education aspect. So I was going away and getting education, educating myself. I studied parapsychology for a while, getting all of that behind me. And what took place was I thought, well, I'm going to open a centre because we need somewhere for education. And so I opened my own spiritualist centre, but made it an educational centre for development. And we had a Sunday service once a week. And I was the only medium, so I did everything. I did all the teaching and all the demonstrating. We had no money. I started off with $20 with a jar of coffee, tea bags, a plate of biscuits. And it ended up being bigger than Ben-Hur. And I modelled it on Simon and Brian's sanctuary in Canada, where I worked, because I went to work with them in Canada. So I liked the way they set up some of their centre. So I modelled my centre in Perth on theirs. And it was so successful. And then I started bringing Simon and Brian into Australia to do retreats with the centre. You know, we do back-to-back retreats like we do at the college. So we give people who were this side of the world, who couldn't afford to travel to the college, the opportunity. And I've been running retreats in Australia now for since 1990. So I was one of the first people to ever run a retreat back-to-back weeks, big weeks in Australia. And so I've done that for years. And so I know Simon and Brian very well. The book's fabulous. So the sanctuary flourished. I trained a lot of mediums. We had a wonderful healing group. And in the end, we get 100, 150 people a week into our service. So we raised funds for charities. I did all sorts of events to raise money, to buy curtains, have it all decked, because it was a community hall that needed dressing up. So we'd raise funds everywhere we could to dress it up. And the Baptist group were in there on a Sunday afternoon. And we used to go in at 5 o'clock Sunday, clear the Baptist stuff out and set the spiritualist stuff up.
Wow.
And so it was sort of bringing spiritualist out, the spiritualism a bit more forward there. And that was very successful. So I did that, and that became successful. And I left a very successful centre after 10 years running it with the same committee for 10 years. That's unheard of.
What an incredible story and thing to do as well, because that's no mean feat to be the organizer, the medium, the tutor, the admin person. It's, you know,
and building my own business, because at that stage I'd decided to leave hairdressing. I became so busy with requests for readings. I then started to teach, and I'd been going to the college for a few years, and my dad introduced me to Simon James, and my dad had said, you need to start teaching some beginners groups, Christine, in Australia. And Simon said, you need to start teaching, Christine. And I went, oh, don't think I can do that. Anyway, I did, and it just has grown and grown. And I've still got students with me now who were students of mine at the centre who are now flourishing mediums, but they come in to sit to classes because they just like to sit and be in the power. So I moved to Sydney 15 years ago and left that in very capable hands, but unfortunately it closed due to a change in the committee years later.
Obviously, you are very unique as a teacher because you're really kind of teaching people from all over the world, from every kind of different background and whatnot. What common threads or themes do you find amongst students from diverse cultures?
Well, I think if you talk to most tutors, and especially tutors, my colleagues from the college and around the world, we all teach globally. We all have students from all over the world that come in. And I think that it's about you, with the diversity, I think it's about understanding that everybody has their own pathway to the spirit and everyone has their own pathway to God. And also getting across to them that mediumship is about the journey of the self. It's about the awareness of us, the opening us of the soul, the opening us of our life, because it's about viewing our life in the bigger picture. I've just come back and I'm about to go again from working in Singapore, and I've worked in Dubai, which is a fairly crazy place for a medium to work. I worked in Dubai and I've worked in Singapore, close to home. And you have to really explain yourself, because there's a lot of things about not devil worship, but things about negativity and hauntings and ghosts, particularly in Singapore. They think everybody's haunted. So you've got to be very careful of all the old ancient cultures there, where those traditions and myths come out. So, I've now got some wonderful students from who come in from a very strong Indian background, who absolutely thought I was the devil incarnate when they first met me, and were mortified the fact that I could converse with their mother in the spirit world. And now they're developing their own ability. So it's about helping people understand they can still have the beauty and the principles of their own belief system, and recognizing that the spirit world is for everybody. And that's what spiritualism is really. Like, we have all that interfaith, we have all different religions. And we sort of say with spiritualism, we can express it, where a lot of religions say, follow me. But I believe that you can be in any culture, any religion, to have a faith or a belief with the spirit world. I choose to follow spiritualism because it suits my principles and who I am. But I think when you're teaching people from different cultures and backgrounds, what you have to do is respect and honor their belief systems as well.
In a way, I guess the spirit world kind of transcends religion. It kind of, it's very unique in that sense, isn't it? Because
it does. I mean, they don't pick and choose. They're not going to pick. The spirit's not going to say, I'm not going to talk to her, she's a Buddhist, or she's a Hindu, or she's a Sikh. That's not how the spirit world works. And that's not what we teach in spiritualism. So, when you get that across, and when you get to the stage of eradicating fear with people, if you can help eradicate the fear of the other world, you can then get them to realize it's a very natural phenomenon. We're not supernatural people. We are people who have an inherent ability and faculty of mind to be able to touch a bigger consciousness and to be able to touch the other world. But the other world that I know in 35 years of working is a wonderful, loving place. And they're loving people who just want to help people. And they come back not just to say, oh, hi from Granny. I mean, what's the point of that? Why do you want to just say hello to your dead Granny? Where's the principle in that? They come back to help us make our lives better here, to help us realize that we have everything within us that we need if we decide to soul search. And if we so choose to learn more about their world, they're not going to point the finger because you might have a different religion. At this center that I had in Perth, I used to do some of my spiritual, Brian and Simon will tell you, I used to hire a very strict Catholic monastery with the monks to do my spiritualism retreats. And so that, now what happened was, as they got to know me over a couple of years running the retreats and listening and working, two of the brothers became very strong members of my congregation at the center. And we used to joke and say, oh yes, we go to mass in the morning and then we'll come and speak to the dead at night. So there used to be this little joke. And one of the brothers, who was very lovely, I can remember him, and he passed. And I will tell you, he was communicating with us a week later in our Spiritualist Sanctuary.
That's incredible.
So, do you know, I have to say, I think that we can't streamline the spirit world. We can't limit it. We can't put it into a box and a technique and formula. It is the most natural phenomena that we have around us. If we can approach it naturally, we become a natural medium, and we become natural in our relationship with them, rather than it being something you take out of your pocket on a Sunday to go to church. That's not what spiritualism promotes, but also it's not what the spirit world promote. But I think you have to engage and recognize that there's a thread of truth in every religion. And if it works for someone, why shouldn't they have a belief or an expression in something else. Spirit is not confined just to spiritualism, and I think that's very important to recognize.
How does the spirit world and the fact that life is eternal, what impact does that have in the way that you live your life?
I'm not frightened of death. I don't think I have any fear of it. The fact that in the way it impacts me, and I've had a lot of loss, sadly, in my life. A lot of loss, younger brother, younger nephew. Lost both of my dads, biological and stepdad, very quickly. We had about 4 passings in 12 months in my family over the last few years. It was very quick. And I find that knowing that life is eternal, that actually helps me understand that I've not lost them, that I know that I'll meet up with them again, and that there is something there. Whether or not they all believe in it, it doesn't matter. I know that I'll meet them when I get to the other side, and they're still there. And the other thing that I think it helps me understand and be grateful for is that they're not suffering.
Mm. Do you think that when we send a message up to the spirit world, whether it's to a loved one or anyone for that matter, do you think they always receive it?
No.
No. I
You
was
want me to
hoping
be
you would say
straight and
yes, it
honest?
was like an email address or
Well,
something.
the thing is, no, I like to call a spade, and I'll always tell you how it is. I'm not God, and I may be well wrong, and I could be proven wrong, but I believe that you can't just throw a flippant thought out and think the spirit world's going to grab it. I think that there is time and place for sending those thoughts out, but I do know that they come close to us very naturally when we're probably not even thinking about it, and can sense our thoughts, and we can sense theirs. But to believe that they get every thought that we think that we send to them, I think that's a little bit of a misconception.
If you did want to get a thought to someone, what would you say is a more reliable way of trying to get a thought to someone in the spirit world?
One, you could either do that through an independent consciousness, which means another person than you, another medium, an independent consciousness, or you actually can sit quietly and send thoughts to them yourself. Over a period of time, have consistency with that, and they will respond. But you can't just think, oh yeah, I really want you to come and show yourself to me. Now that you've gone, make sure you come and see me. And then you forget it and you think, oh, 6 months later, well, they've not come, because it's a fleeting thought, and thought is just vibration, and it just disperses into the ether. So that's why we have purposeful intention with the vibration of thought that goes to their world, and that purposeful intention they pick up when the intention is correct. But I do believe it's much closer than what we think. And I think that it's much more natural than what we think. But I also think there's a hell of a lot we don't understand.
I couldn't agree more. I always think that the more I seem to learn, the more I think I don't know. It was actually when I first went to the college, the only thing I wanted to know was I wanted to be proved that the spirit world was real, and it all just came to me so easily. But the longer I go along on this journey, I think there is so much this universe I don't know. What advice would you give to people that are trying to develop their mediumship and perhaps attune to the spirit world, from all of the teachers, sort of students that you've mentored over a period of time? And secondly, what are the common things you find that people come up against when they're trying to develop their mediumship, the sort of barriers that sort of stop them moving forward as easily?
Okay, so the first bit, I think definitely is you have to really soul search why you want to do it, and what your purpose is behind it, and how you will use that, because you are responsible to the spirit. You are pledging something to the spirit world to open up your mind, to touch their world, to bring forward communication evidentially, which aids and supports grief, sadness, upliftment, but also is very joyful. You have all that, where there's things that weren't expressed that are said, or you have some unfinished business or sadness there. But because mediumship's a healing art, And then so you have that healing, but also you have times when it's just so joyful because they're so close to their recipient, and the recipient has a wake-up call knowing that, oh my God, they're still here. They are alive. They can communicate. So I think the purpose and intention with someone starting out is really important, very important. I think I've answered that because I think I forgot half your first question. And and the second one, the biggest thing that you come up about is self-doubt and fear of getting it wrong, self-doubt, and also answering back to number one is stop trying. I think there's too much trying rather than just being.
I think that's so true. I can relate to that a lot myself, actually.
Yeah, because we all hungry at the beginning. I was like, I want it. I couldn't get enough. I devoured books. I've got tubs of files that I wrote. And, I did a lot of study. And I then all of a sudden realized, actually, it was the wonderful Mavis Patilla, who actually said to me years ago, she said, Christine, put that pen down. Many years ago, I was in her class. It was a trance class, and I'd been sitting writing some notes, and she sat beside me and she said, I think it's time you put the pen down, not just this week, but I feel that it's time for the pen to stop. And I did. And because then I had gathered all this education and information and new things, and I had certificates and everything, but all of that doesn't make you a medium. It's just mental gymnastics. Really, I realized that I need, because I'm the sort of person I need to know. Don't tell me I'm a clairvoyant. I want to know, what is clairvoyance? How am I a clairvoyant? So I'm a sort of got a mind that wants to. So I think the trying stops people, and in the trying you lose the joy and the beauty of being with the spirit world. Do you understand that?
Everything you're saying is so true, because, but I'll tell you why I can relate to it, because this was I have told this story already on the podcast, but my friend Melissa and me were kind of at a similar level of development. And a few months ago, after I went to the Arthur Findlay College, I made a meditation where I took all the best bits of kind of sitting in the power, and then I just sent it to a couple of people, forgot all about it. It was a distant memory. Then a few months later, me being me, I've, like you, devoured loads of books, watched loads of things online. And Melissa said to me, I'm having such great experiences connected to my guides. I can feel them. I'm having all these. And I said, Melissa, how are you doing it? Because I just can't seem to get my head around it. She said, Jason, I'm using the meditation you sent me. I just put it on for 10 minutes a night. And I've done that for 2 months. I thought, oh my God, I just couldn't stop laughing. I thought, she's used my own meditation. That just sums it all up. But you do. I'm one of these people. I just seem to need to go, it's not enough for me to just read a book. I'm one of these people where I have to go and start a podcast. I have to interview some of the world's best mediums, all to feel that I fully understand the subject. It's just, it's funny, isn't it?
I think it's important. I cannot stress enough how important education is. I think education is really important. We have some great mediums in the world today, and we have some wonderful educational mediums, and we have mediums who can operate on the platform, but they don't know a lot. They haven't got a lot of education behind them. So we have people who go and develop, they sit in a group, they get a contact, and they think that's it. And so they're out demonstrating or doing readings, and they don't go into the philosophy, the understanding, the reason why we communicate, the reason why we have this relationship with the spirit world, what it can do for us in our lives, what they're endeavoring to help us and show us within our lives. So I think also when it comes down to students and teaching, and even for Christine herself, when I go to sit now, if I'm quiet, I know that when I'm natural and quiet, it's better. If I'm trying, it doesn't work. You defeat the purpose. So put your trying in a bucket.
I love
Put your
that.
trying
I think
in a
that's
bucket.
such a good advice.
Put a trying in a bucket and just sit and just say, here I am, dear spirit, willing to be of service and unfold this beautiful ability within me to work with your world or be an ambassador for you in whichever way. And that can be speaking, it can be prayer, it can be art, You know, it can be music. You know, the gifts of the spirit are not just evidential communication. You can have beautiful poetry. You can have different ways of expression of the spirit, which is still spiritual. And they're virtues of the spirit. So if you confine yourself to development, to just getting a great contact or perfect evidence, you will never be satisfied, because that won't fulfill you.
Because
That makes sense.
it does make sense. Is that how? Because obviously you do spirit art as well, don't you?
I don't do it professionally. I dabble with it. I dabble with it privately at home. And some days I'm very good, and other days I'm absolutely rubbish.
How would you define the difference between good and bad? Because surely, how do you know when it's good and it's not good?
Because the way it happens, it happened very naturally. I just was sitting and I just had the feeling to draw, and I just wanted to draw a face. And I started to do some of that. And then I kept getting images, and I just knew that I could put it on paper, and I did. And some of them were very good. And then other times when I was doing it, they would look like a 3-year-old's drawing. And I was nowhere near it. It was rubbish. They must have been sitting there laughing because it was shocking, Jason. I went, oh my God. So, you know, if I apply myself and I take the time to really blend with that power and sit quietly, it may happen. But that for me was very spontaneous, and it's always been spontaneous. It's not a fluent, I would say, ability that I have that I can just go and do it. It happens on a spontaneous level.
I guess you need to be able to hold the spirit contact for quite some time to be able to do that as well.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. What do you have any books that you would recommend to people? Because obviously you said you have read and devoured so many books. I always love asking this question because, well, firstly, Christy, for myself, actually.
Well, you know, I would recommend, there's a lot of good books out there on the market by lots of good mediums that have been written with very good advice in them for the development of them. I loved all of Glyn Edwards' books, and I loved a lot of the old books. So I still have very old books of the pioneers, and some of them like written in very old language, but I love it because it just makes sense to me. So I think I would say with books, I think you have to see someone who's worth their salt. I think you always have to say, you know, because so many people write books these days, but I always think the value is when you go and see them work consistently, because everybody can have a good day and a bad day, a good dem and a bad dem. And so when you see a consistency in someone's work, and also I believe, look at how they are as people, Jason, right? Look at how they are. They might have a great book on the shelf, but are they a good person? Or they just wrote a good book? Are they really spirituality in action? Are they taken out of their pocket just for their book? Or are they actually being the living spiritual medium in a daily basis? Because spirituality in action is not confined, like I said, to evidential communication. But for books, you know, I recommend to my students a lot of old books, a lot of the old pioneers. One of the best books I think I ever read that really motivated me was what's the name of it? Gosh, it's gone. Do you know, it's just gone. It's not even a spiritualist book. It's gone. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me. I'm sorry.
No,
but
that's all right. Always.
It was about peace and finding that peacefulness within yourself. And it was about finding that center of self, so that when you were centered, God, I can't think of the name. I've got it upstairs.
It's all right. You can email me afterwards and I'll put it in the show notes.
I will. And it's I will, because it's a really good book, and it's written from an Eastern culture. But it's about finding self in that space in that self that allows you to touch your spirit, but also other spirits. And that's what motivated me a lot. But I love all the old books, like everybody. I don't read as much these days, but I think people that you should look at the credibility in the background of the people that are teaching you and whose books you're reading, so you can see where it comes from.
Christine, I have loved this conversation. It has been so good, and I've learned so much. If people want to find out more about you, where can they go to?
Well, basically just my website, www.christinemorgan.com.au. The community is global, like everybody's community, but I run several groups online, which is all global, at different times through the week to fit different time frames. And they can email me on there because I don't advertise the groups on the website, but the website tells you a little bit about the school that I run. And the school is actually my logo. So it's not a school with walls, it's the school without walls, I call it, but it's my logo and branding, but it's created a community so people can contact me there. Yeah.
I like that. A school without walls. It sounds very freeing, Christine. It sounds like somewhere my
It
spirit
is.
can flow in and out of. I like that.
It is. It is.
Well,
It
thank
is.
you so much for coming on the Soul Sync. I've loved it, and I'm sure everyone has loved it just as much as me.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Jason. It was wonderful.